Now, the BuckeyeXtra podcast with Joey Kaufman and Rob Oller from the Columbus Dispatch.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another edition of the BuckeyeXtra football podcast. I'm Joey Kaufman, joined by columnist Rob Oller. Ohio State defeated Penn State 38-14 on Saturday, and it looked like for a moment that it could be a classic Ohio State-Penn State game where it was two teams separated maybe by a score in the second half. Maybe Ohio State would pull away late, but it looked like it was going to be a four-quarter game, and then ultimately it did not play out that way. Ohio State was only up 17-14 at halftime, but 21 unanswered points in the second half to really pull away and show why they are number one in the country, and Penn State is still searching for its first Big Ten win and its first win since mid-September. So these teams, this is not the heyday of the Ohio State-Penn State series. That's for sure.
Right. And it's a little sad to me. You want a strong Big Ten. I would think you'd want a strong Big Ten if you're a Ohio State fan. What did you think of the overall performance? I think, Joey, did you have the score? Was your prediction spot on, or did you have 31-14?
I had 31-14. So I was I undersold Ohio State by a touchdown, which may not seem that much, but I think if you had money on the game, that touchdown did quite a lot for your whether they covered the point spread or not.
I had 31-3. I thought the defense would. It's not that they played poorly. They had kind of the one long drive they allowed, and then the turnover. But Penn State has talent. I probably didn't consider that when I had my three. I got a little starry-eyed over how good this Ohio State defense is, which it is really good. But it only gave up 14.
Well, in your defense, I think Penn State really only had one big boy touchdown drive, the nearly 8-minute drive in the second quarter, where they punched it in the end zone after eating up a ton of clock, and they were moving the ball well on the ground with Nick Singleton and Katron Allen. But the second touchdown they scored was, let's face it, virtually gift wrapped by a fumble by C.J. Donaldson that set Ohio State, or set Penn State up right at the Ohio State the doorstep of the end zone there. So they didn't really do a ton on the Ohio State defense other than that one very long drive in the second quarter.
Right, which is what I focused on.
And that was not a great drive, because if you were Ohio State and you want to see how they do against a team that is physical at the line of scrimmage, well, they're going to face a team that can do that in about a month in Ann Arbor. And so that was not really what you wanted to see, but they really, I think, made adjustments at halftime, and Penn State did absolutely nothing in the second half, moving the ball on the ground. They sacked Ethan Grunkmeyer 4 times in the second half. They had minus rushing yards in the second half, including the sacks. So that I think was Ohio State eventually kind of tightened the screws a little bit. But that one drive in the second quarter was certainly not ideal for the Buckeyes.
Yeah, I mean, is that a premonition of what's to come? It could have been just a hiccup. Like you said, they adjusted. But I'm sure there was a fairly large percentage of Buckeye Nation that were like, oh no, we better clean this up for Michigan.
Sure, because that was sort of flashbacks to what has happened in that rivalry in years past. And Penn State was doing a lot to try to move the ball on the ground. They were using some formations with 7 offensive linemen. So, I mean, there's only so much you can really do. That's not probably a sustainable 4-quarter strategy for a team to try out 7 offensive linemen. And eventually I think Ohio State was able to adjust to deal with that. But that's just something maybe to file away for the future.
So here's my question for you. What's more impressive? I think I know the answer. What are you more impressed by? Which side of the ball is more dangerous, is more impressive through 8 games? Ohio State's offense, which gets a lot of the love because of the high-flying circus act of Julian Sayin to Jeremiah Smith and Tate and, name your receiver. or a defense that is just locked down, uh, easily statistically a top probably 10, maybe 5 in Ohio State history, depending which numbers you look at. And what player impresses you the most on both sides of the ball? Against Penn State, I mean, keep it in the context of against a pretty good talented team like Penn State.
I think for the season, you still tilt your hand to the Ohio State defense. I think the one guy just for the Ohio State defense as the season as a whole, you look at where they were coming in, the loss of 8 starters, a coordinator change. I think for where they're sitting in November, they have certainly outpaced my expectations further. Against Penn State, I really think Carnell Tate had a day where he has really stood out. I think in a lot of ways, his deep ball chemistry with Julian Sain is really impressive. They've only missed once this year on throws of 20 or more yards. And that is, I think, remarkable to have a quarterback and receiver to be that in sync throwing down the field. And so Carnell Tate had the 45-yard touchdown, had a 57-yard reception that set up another score. And just, I think to have that level of accuracy moving down the field, I think that might be the best deep ball tandem in college football, which is saying something because Jeremiah Smith also caught a 57-yard pass of his own. But outside of a miss against Illinois, Sain has never missed when he's looked to take deep. And so I think that is certainly something not to take for granted, the efficiency that they have when they go deep. And I think that was very apparent against Penn State.
Yeah, that's all they had to do. I think you wrote extensively about the deep ball and that whole thing. And I think I wrote just rinse and repeat. Which brings up an interesting question of how good your running game has to be when your passing attack is this impressive. I think you're still going to need a decent run game. Now they averaged 5.1 a carry, but that was skewed by the long run by Jackson. But I guess games can always be skewed. If a guy breaks a long one, that you never know. When you just look at stats, if you just go into, let's say, Oklahoma game or whatever, and you see that they ran for 5.6 a carry, you don't know if there were 2 80-yard runs and then they didn't do anything else with it, So the devil's in the details of the run stats sometimes. But yeah, you said it. Like, as long as they can just at will almost throw deep, they're going to be okay.
Yeah, because if you really were to nitpick the offensive performance against Penn State, you could have a few things that you point out. You point out the second red zone trip they had where they have to settle for a field goal and Chaz Coleman goes around Carson Hinsman and gets Julian Sain to get rid of the ball on a third down. That forces them to trot out Jaden Fielding for a field goal. They have not been probably as good as you would like to see them finishing drives in the red zone with touchdowns. And that was a red flag that showed up early in the second quarter against Penn State. And the running game sputtered at times, not just the Donaldson fumble there late in the second quarter, but until Bo Jackson's 51-yard run, they hadn't really been overwhelmingly impressive on the ground. And I think the interior of the offensive line didn't always clear the holes you wanted to see from them on some short yardage situation. But it just doesn't feel like it matters all that much at the end of the day, and certainly not in the regular season, the way Ohio State's passing game is. They have perhaps the 2 best offensive players in college football this year, and Tate and Jeremiah Smith. And of course you have Julian Sain, who has a claim to that title as well. To me, that's the thing that it feels like the ultimate trump card they can play at any time in the game, no matter how much we talk and write about the run game sputtering and this and that, and maybe they're not finishing drives in the red zone. And maybe that'll bite them at some point, especially in a college football playoff and in a shortened game where situations are going to matter even more against quality opponents. But right now, it doesn't feel like it matters all that much because they can just really, it feels like at any time, go deep and it'll be effective.
It reminds me a little bit, and forgive me, I can't remember the tailback at the moment, but it reminds me of 2020 Alabama in terms of the firepower of an offense. I think they had what, was it Mac Jones?
Mac Jones and then the Heisman Trophy winner Devontae Smith.
Right. So, and then they had they
Najee
had more,
Harris running the ball.
they did have Najee. Yeah, okay.
So that was
They
that was
ran
more complete offense. This is unique in where they have, I think, it tilts so heavily in favor of your pass game.
yeah. Yeah, I'm trying to even think of another team that was really, really good that was like this. And I'm just rolling through the names and the teams. And I think of 2019 LSU. No, they were pretty balanced. They had a really good tailback. Bo Jackson's a good tailback.
I mean, that's the comp as LSU maybe with when you had Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson as your two wide receivers, 2019
Right.
LSU.
Yeah, and that was pretty strong. They had a good run game too. I don't know what their average. I don't have it up in front of me in terms of what they average per rush, but I don't think Bo Jackson's the issue. It's
No, and in some ways, Bo Jackson, I think, is giving you something
Help.
to be optimistic about.
Right. I agree. It's just your run blocking for whatever reason is just not as stout and as aggressive and impressive as you would think, which is interesting to me because you would think defenses would just say, well, we got to defend the pass first. As potent as Ohio State's offense is, we'll let them run a little bit, but we got to stop this pass.
Yeah, and I don't think it's always just on the offensive line. It's the tight end as well because Ohio State runs a lot of 12 personnel, and if you're in 12 personnel, you're going to have teams that are playing up closer to the line of scrimmage. It's a heavier personnel base. I mean, one of the first big whiffs in the run games was when I can't remember which of the tight ends it was, but it was in the first quarter. He was coming down the block and missed somebody coming off the edge, and that is, I think, going to be an issue for them as well to clean up. It's not just missed blocking assignments or breakdowns by the offensive linemen, but the tight ends as well.
Yeah, I mean, there's been little mistakes here and there, which we don't have, we're not privy to their practices, so we don't know how much time they're spending on one part of the offense versus another. I'm pretty sure that they worked pretty hard on the run game during their when they were idle, their off week. Is it going to be a problem? I'm kind of with you. It's like as long as you can throw the ball and protect. There's the thing. Like I don't know what defenses are out there. I'd like to know the pressure rate of a Michigan, how they're doing, of a Georgia or whoever it may be, of an Alabama. Like how easily and how much are they getting to the quarterback? We've seen Julian Sayin, Heisman front runner, Julian Sayin. Do we have to say Heisman front runner, Julian Sayin every time we mention him now? We may have to.
Now that they're leading most of you're sure your new Heisman favorite based on the betting odds.
Yeah, exactly. But he's shown some ability to slide in the pocket and be somewhat elusive in the pocket. That's a good sign. And he did have that maybe the way it's being talked up, it's the greatest 9-yard run in the history of Ohio State football by a quarterback. I think it's significant that he did. It wasn't so much that he gained 9 yards, saying it was 3rd and 5, I believe. It was a big point in the game. I think 10-7, maybe. It was 3rd down, first half, and he dropped back and showed a lot of poise and just kind of keeping the eyes downfield and getting the first down. Ryan Day said it was the turning point in the game. Okay, that's a little bit of coach speak. I think when you've got the deep ball that Ohio State has, I'm not sure it would have mattered. Maybe it would have. But I think more than the run itself is it showed that Julian Sayin has the ability to get I don't even call them tough yards, get the unexpected yards when needed. Like he's a bit of more of a threat. After watching that play, defenses are going to see him as a little more of a run threat than he has shown.
And I think you want to see maybe some willingness, just some toughness from your
Yeah.
quarterback to when the play breaks down to run for the ball. I think that's an intangible quality that you don't really ever see from a quarterback until they're playing a live game on Saturday, because in practice they'd blow it dead if somebody's within too close of proximity of the quarterback in the non-contact jersey on a Tuesday or Wednesday night. So this is a Saturday, and you get to see him move around when the play collapses.
Yeah. And it was talked about a lot, written about a lot. Um, a good sign if you're in Ohio State for Ohio State fans that your quarterback can do something like that. Um, what about Penn? What else about Penn State? We haven't touched on Jim Knowles yet.
No, and I keep thinking which of the if you follow Ohio sports, Al Golden is the Cincinnati Bengals defensive coordinator, left the national champion runner-up to go to the Bengals to be their defensive coordinator, and Jim Knowles left the national championship winner to go to Penn State to be their defensive coordinator. And which guy made in hindsight the more head-scratching career move? Because I bet Jim Knowles would like to be. Well, maybe I don't know, but I guess he always is an interesting guy in his own way. But you would think the personnel at Ohio State would be fun to coach. Caleb Downs and Arvell Reese, probably the two best defensive players in college football, and the situation at Penn State is certainly bleak. And I think certainly Ohio State fans are satisfied with the state of their defense and the new defensive coordinator, Matt Patricia.
Absolutely. And we need to address the elephant in the room, which was late in the game. The stadium ops scoreboard video people decided to show Jim Knowles in his blue and white Penn State gear up in the coaching box, up in the press box, defensive coordinator, to, of course, a chorus of boos from Ohio State fans in the stadium. And then the camera switched to Matt Patricia on the sideline to raucous cheers. And I would have been okay with that, a one-time deal. But instead, whoever was in charge kept flipping back and forth. They'd show Knowles, cheer, boos. And it went on just too far. And I think that what, Joey, I think you're with me on this, is that not to sound like the stuffy get off my lawn guy here, but show a little respect for a defensive coordinator that helped you win a national championship. Yes, it ended not on the best terms. Traitorous is a little too strong. I know that word's been used. I think you nailed it. Maybe foolish. Maybe foolish more than traitorous, and that he left something really good for an unknown. There were some personal things that entered into that, again, of disrespect. I think he felt disrespected. His contract was, they were hedging on, I think his contract, you can speak to that, but it was just a little too much. It was a little too over the top and a little, shall I say, Bush League.
Yeah, it felt like, look, clearly Ohio State has won the Jim Knowles breakup. You look at where they are in the Big Ten standings, and you glance at Penn State, it's at the bottom, it's winless, and they were up by a lot in the fourth quarter. It just felt like they were twisting the knife a little bit. And I think you are correct. I don't follow any fan for booing. Look, Jim Knowles left to one of your biggest competitors in the Big Ten. I think you are within your right to feel slighted. He is coaching for the other team and trying to beat you, and made a financial decision as well to do that. And he's getting $3 million a year to be a professional. And so I don't blame the Ohio State fans for that reaction. But to me, it still feels like, in the bigger picture of the arc of Ohio State's program, Jim Knowles was an instrumental figure in why they won a national title. And I don't think you have to be happy about his decision to leave, but it just feels more. And I'm not saying they needed to give him a tribute video to come back to Ohio Stadium, and certainly I think that would have been awkward. But it felt like the pot shots and the piling on was also not appropriate for what he did as far as his 3 years at Ohio State.
I would agree with that. Here's an interesting.
Ryan Day said earlier in the week that they respected the work he did, but he sort of made a business decision, and I think that was probably the apt way to put it.
He made a business decision. We don't know how much of the personal got involved in there. We don't have the total details on. We have some theories, that he wasn't able to run his defense his way, exactly his way. He wasn't given total control. These are all speculations. The Larry Johnson, Jim Knowles. Was there friction there? I don't know. We kind of suspected there might have been. We've been told no, but we've been told no. We've been told no on a lot of things that didn't end up being the case. Or that did end up being the case. Here's my question. If Urban Meyer returned and coached Penn State, let's say they hired Urban Meyer. This is totally, and they flashed to Urban Meyer on the video and then flashed to Ryan Day. Would Urban Meyer get booed as much as Jim Knowles did? Now, it's easy to tee off on an assistant coach. In some ways,
I don't think Urban would get it to the same.
I don't think so either. He was 7-0 versus Michigan. First off, that's
and I think a lot of Ohio State fans would make the case that if you were to play devil's advocate to our argument about Knowles and the job he did with the defense, is that he was a product of having some of the best players in college football and 8 guys who were taken in the NFL draft last year, and Knowles sort of arrived at Ohio State at a good time. I think that's probably, underselling a little bit of his role, but I think it's easier sometimes to make that argument with maybe an assistant coach than a head coach.
Right. I agree with that. And of course, you could say the same with Patricia, right? I mean, as well as Patricia has stepped into a situation and the defensive has improved statistically, he's got pretty good talent there. Now, it wasn't necessarily proven talent, but talent nonetheless. I mean, Arvell Reese is no one really knew. I mean, has he been developed into the player he is, or was it just sort of it was his time? There's a question. I mean, Patricia deserves a ton of credit. Don't get me. I'm not trying to say he's just there. I'm not trying to say Patricia was born on third base. But he does have a lot of talent.
Yeah, I think probably the talent was even undersold coming in this year, because the way we often write and talk about college football is so skewed toward what we know and returning talent. And it was very easy to raise question marks about the Ohio State defense because they only had 3 returning starters. And it's why some of the preseason expectations for Penn State and Clemson were inflated, because they had returning starters. But now with the transfer portal and so much roster movement, I think you can sort of undersell a little bit, because even they brought in somebody like Bo Atkinson, who was a starter from North Carolina. He wasn't a returning starter, but he's been somebody who's been helpful for the defense as well. And Ohio State had more depth than you would typically have. Typically, teams might lose somebody like Caden Curry, Kenyatta Jackson, Jermaine Matthews to the transfer portal, Arvell Reese, because they weren't immediately playing, so they kept those guys, but they were experienced players who played a lot of snaps. Caden Curry had about 500 snaps in his career before the season as a backup. He wasn't a starter, but that's undervalued as well, and he's been a great edge rusher. I think Patricia's enhanced the defense. There's no question about that, but the talent that he has at the disposal was probably a little bit undersold coming into this season as well. And then he's enhanced it, because what they're doing with Arvell Reese is different than what they've not. They haven't always used a linebacker like a defensive end. The way he's been able to drop down and move to an edge. He had a sack in the second half, where instead of lining up in the box, they moved him down as a 5th defensive lineman. He lined up on the edge and got into the backfield and just overwhelmed the Penn State left tackle. So they are being creative, and they have good players to do it, which is always when Ohio State is at its most dangerous.
What did you think? I had somebody mention to me yesterday, an Ohio State fan and a family of Ohio State fans who, according to this guy I know, his family is always critical of officiating. Ohio State is always getting the raw deal from officials, and yet he and his family were somewhat amazed that they did not uphold the targeting call, the initial targeting call against Caleb Downs. When I first saw it, I thought, well, there's targeting. He launched and hit him, and then they overruled. They did give it a 15-yard, not non-sportsman, like what was it, a personal foul or unnecessary roughness, maybe?
Yeah. Well,
Uh, what was your thought? Is that Caleb Downs is a national superstar, so he gets a little leniency? I don't know. After looking at it again and again, um, I was a little surprised they didn't call targeting, which would have been a big deal because he would have missed Purdue. If there's a game to miss, it's probably
you don't
Purdue.
want to walk into Purdue without Caleb Downs for a half. Or no, though, you would have missed the whole game because it was the second half.
Oh, that's right. It was second
Wait,
half.
no,
First half. First half.
Just the first half.
Just the first half. What did you? I mean, this is, of course, getting into the weeds on this stuff, but that would have been a big. That was a big overturn of a call, I guess.
It was surprising because it felt like the textbook definition of targeting when they explained to anybody before the season about him launching. And I mean, they have been on they've been fortunate with some targeting calls because last year against Nebraska, Arvell Reese was close to being missing the following first half. After the Nebraska game, he would have missed the first half against Penn State. But the Big Ten went back, I think it was on Monday, and they overruled the call. And he was able to be available against Penn State. So both of those calls looked like targeting to me, and they didn't get it. So or Ohio State was on the benefit of the overturn.
Yeah, all I say is, Buckeye fans out there, remember that the next time you think the call goes against the Scarlet and Gray, that Caleb Downs, they reversed that call. So the refs aren't always, maybe 99.9% of the time, the officiating is out to get. Buckeye Nation is out to get Ohio State, Ohio against the world. At least definitely Ohio State against the officiating crews. But in this instance, I think it went OSU's way. Of course, we're being facetious here. But there you go.
They'll have him back against the Purdue Boilermakers, who are still looking for their first Big Ten win since 2023, but they are more competitive this year, Rob. We were talking about that beforehand, where they were actually pretty close at Michigan last Saturday, and Purdue is still winless in the Big Ten this year, but it's the average margin of defeat is only 11 points, and it was 29 points last year. 3 out of their last 4 losses have been by 1 score or less. So this is a Purdue team that should not challenge Ohio State, but I think it's a more, at least, competitive outfit than it was under Ryan Walters year 1 under Barry Odom.
Yeah, they've had some close calls. I kind of feel sorry for them. I mean, they haven't won a Big Ten game since
Yeah.
2023, and they've come close. They've botched some endings. They've thrown some games away, which is what happens when you are, losing. The snowball, rolls. You get caught up in that snowball, and you are downhill. But I think they'll be, I'm looking at a 40, 50 something to 7, 3, 10 score, something in that range. I don't see Purdue putting more than 10 points on the board, and I think they might be lucky to get that. But Hey, they've got the Boilermakers have their basketball team, so football, it's something to do on
College
Saturday.
basketball starts this week, so no matter how Saturday goes for the Boilermakers, you have something to look forward to. College
Right. And I think they're picked, are they preseason 1 or 2 or something like that?
we're number one in the AP poll, yeah.
Yeah. So
Yes.
they're not crying. Although the money comes from football typically. So you don't want your football program, even if you're a basketball school, you don't want a craptastic football program.
No, I mean look at how things have changed in Bloomington. They're in-state rival.
Right. Right.
Pays to be good and football.
Yeah.
The Purdue was the beginning of a 3-game stretch that is pretty favorable for the Buckeyes leading into the game at Michigan, especially the defenses they are going to see. I was looking this up earlier today, but they are going to, before Michigan, play the teams in the Big Ten that rank 15th, 16th, and 17th in scoring defense. Purdue is
Ooh.
87th nationally in the FBS in scoring defense. UCLA, which will come to Columbus the next week, is 114th. And then Rutgers, which comes the following week, is 115th. So this is a 3-week stretch where you are not going to see the best of the Big Ten defenses, and Ohio State really will not be tested on until Ann Arbor. But for a school that launched a Heisman Trophy campaign for its quarterback Julian Sain and star wide receiver Jeremiah Smith, maybe a good 3-week stretch to try to pad those stats and play in some defenses that you should be able to throw some touchdowns against. So they'll get to juice those numbers up for the next few weeks.
Yeah, I think you're right. They could definitely pad the stats. Now, do you want to go in not exactly knowing what you have in the run game with Michigan? I don't know. I think I'd feel a little better if I was Ryan Day and you had a 200-yard rushing game against one of these teams and uh or higher, and it looked like it was clicking. So that's the balance. I think probably. Man, Julian's saying just maybe we can just kind of full circle um, Heisman Trophy leading candidate Jeremiah Smith. Will they split votes? They're two different positions, so I think they will maybe split some votes there, which will hurt them. And I think you've said this over and over and correctly. It's going to come down to that. It could come down to that Big Ten championship game. Um, Indiana's quarterback again and saying, and that'll be a fun one because C.J. Stroud kind of lost. He was right there on the cusp of winning the Heisman in what, 21?
21 and 22, he had a chance to win it both years.
Yeah, and they lose to Michigan, and that kind of ended it. So that's your Heisman game.
I think he would have won it for sure in 21. 22, Caleb Williams at USC was having a great year, and I think was pushing him. But CJ, if they beat Michigan both those times, Ohio State's in the college football playoff, and that would have been his advantage in both of those years. So he was really close. I think a lot of Ohio State's cases or guys who are up for the Heisman, Sain or Smith, it's going to come down to what happens the last weekend in November, first weekend in December. It's typically kind of a 2-week race now, but they've put themselves in a position where I think their name recognition is such that they are going to have a chance if they win those games to not only send those guys to New York, but maybe even win the Heisman. And that's something that has not happened since Troy Smith. Ohio State sent a lot of guys to New York under Ryan Day, but none of them actually come home with the trophy. So this might be their best chance because no one else in the field has really been the obvious candidate either. None of the quarterbacks are outside of Fernando Mendoza at Indiana seems to have gotten a lot of buzz about it. Diego Pavia Vanderbilt, they just lost to Texas this past weekend. So it's set up where the Heisman will maybe run through Indianapolis first weekend in December.
Wow. Hard to believe. Hard to believe. Indiana, that's for another time. That's an amazing when Big Ten championship week, if Ohio State's in it. We
Right?
haven't really touched on that. I mean, if they lose to Michigan, there's a decent chance.
We start getting to learn some tiebreakers.
And I did look, we can save this, but I did look at the tiebreaker, and from my quick analysis, Oregon, if they would win out, I think would have the advantage, would win the tiebreaker, because you look at head-to-head, you look at common opponents, then you look at how the teams you played fared in conference. And I think Oregon will have a slight advantage. Their opponents were a little better than Ohio State's opponents in the conference, at least at the moment when I checked a week ago. Now that's getting ahead of things. We can revisit that, but the Michigan game, even though it may not be what it was in terms of impact on the playoffs and that whole thing, it does have impact beyond just the rivalry. It's who goes to the Big Ten championship game, maybe.
Although, even if the way the college football playoff rankings work now, it's the top 4 seeds are the teams that are just seeded 1 through 4. So it's a straight seeding model this year. They're not reserved for college. They're not reserved for the conference champions this year. So it's conceivable the Big Ten could have 2 teams, even 3 teams, get a first round bye. So it'd be interesting to see how the committee were to treat Ohio State if they were 11-1, missed the Big Ten championship game. Would they still have a first round bye?
It's hard for me to see because of who would be in that Big Ten championship game. I'm guessing, could be wrong here, it would be a rematch of Indiana and Oregon.
Probably depends on what happened in that game too, or if Indiana were to beat Oregon or some situation.
Right. I mean, you lose to Michigan. Yeah, I'm with you. That's curiosity.
I do think if you go 12-0, you're likely going to have a bye no matter what happens in that title game.
Yeah.
Maybe it's better to be the 1 seed and play the group of 5 team in the wait, no, scratch that, because it's for the 5th seed.
Yeah. But you'd be almost certainly going to the Rose Bowl for the quarterfinal?
If you win the Big Ten title game.
Right.
But if you lose, then it's some other New Year's 6 site.
Yeah, right. Okay. Well, we're looking at the horizon when, as Ryan Day would say, you got to focus on the here and now. Be where your feet are, Nick Saban said, and that's Purdue. Okay. Whatever you say, Nick.
We'll have more for you next week after the Buckeyes visit West Lafayette. That was Rob Oller. I'm Joey Kaufman. Thanks for joining us on the BuckeyeXtra Football Podcast. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify. Leave a 5-star review if you like us. Thanks for listening.